Okay, so this is chapter 4, part 2. We're talking about yeasts, or fungal cells, and specifically we're talking about yeasts first. They are round to oval shaped. They reproduce by asexual reproduction. Some fungal cells are considered dimorphic, and that means they can take several forms. One form is hyphae, which is long thread-like cells, and then there's pseudohypha, which are just chains of yeast cells. They appear to look like hyphae, but they're not. So there's a picture of some yeasts with some budding. Okay, so there's about 300 species of fungi that can cause human disease, and there's 3 types of diseases that are caused by fungal cells or fungus. One is community-acquired infections from the environment. Then, of course, there's the hospital-associated infections, and then there are opportunistic infections caused by species that don't normally cause a problem unless there's a weakened immune system. And an example of that would be an AIDS patient is more susceptible to fungal infections. So the fungal cell wall is actually what gives off the allergic reaction to people, and there's various degrees of allergies to funguses out there. Different toxins produced by poisonous mushrooms can induce a neurological disturbance and death. You hear about people that eat a poisonous mushroom, and I guess I've never really heard anybody specifically dying from it, but you read about it and hear about it, in not necessarily locally. Aspergillus flavus, it actually produces a lethal poison to animals who eat contaminated grain. So if the grain is contaminated with this Aspergillus flavus, then it can be toxic to those animals. So, we run into a lot of problems with fungus when it comes to farmers. So there are a lot of crops lost because of fungus, and also can cause disease in domestic animals after eating the contaminated crops. And of course, if you've ever bought strawberries or sometimes those little mini oranges, they can rot pretty quickly, and what you notice is this fuzzy greenish gray thing growing on them, and that is fungus, basically ruining your food. So fungus will rot fresh produce during shipping and storage. 40% of all fresh produce is consumed by fungi, so they're getting a free meal. Some benefits of fungi: basically, without fungus, a lot of our organic matter would not be decomposed, returning it back to the soil. The fungus helps to form stable associations with plant roots and increase their ability to absorb water and nutrients. And of course, through science, fungus has been, different types of fungi have been engineered to produce large quantities of antibiotics, alcohol, organic acids, and also vitamins. So sometimes they put different types of fungi in food to give a little extra flavoring. So different fungal nutrition, you should know these terms. There's heterotrophic, saprobic, and parasitic. As far as heterotrophic, these are fungi that acquire nutrients from a wide variety of organic substrates, meaning substances or things. Okay, so saprobic obtain nutrients from the remnants of dead plants and animals in soil or aquatic habitats. So these saprobic fungi basically take advantage of things that are already dead. And then parasitic fungi grow on the bodies of living animals or plants, although very few require a living host. Fungi tend to thrive in nutritionally poor or adverse environments, and sometimes those with a high salt or sugar content. So you'll notice that maybe you got a sweet tea and you left the cup sitting at the bedside table, and a few days go by, and you open it up, and you realize, there's something fuzzy growing on top. That sugar helps to encourage the multiplication of those fungal cells. As far as the morphology of fungi, so this is what it looks like. Cells of most microscopic fungi grow in loose associated colonies. Colonies of yeast are much like bacteria in that they have a soft, uniform texture and appearance. And then colonies of filamentous fungi have a cottony, hairy, or velvety texture. So when we talk about different morphology, we can describe them as mycelium, the woven intertwining mass of hyphae that makes up the body or colony of a mold. And then some have segments or cross walls referred to as septa. And that's found in most fungi that allow the flow of organelles and nutrients between adjacent compartments. And then we have non-septate hyphae, which is basically there's no septum there's no cross walls, one continuous cell on those. As far as hyphae function, we have vegetative hyphae and we have reproductive or fertile hyphae. The vegetative hyphae is responsible for the visible mass of growth that you see on the surface of whatever it's trying to digest and absorb. And then there's the reproductive hyphae, which during that development of the fungal colony, during the development of the vegetative hyphae, they can give rise to something we refer to as reproductive hyphae, which is basically branching off of the vegetative hyphae. And this is the origin of the spores, or the reproductive bodies of molds. So, reproductive strategies and spore formation. So most can propagate by the outward growth of hyphae or fragmentation, meaning kind of breaking off. Spores in particular are the primary reproductive mode of fungi. They can be dispersed through the environment by air, by water, and of course by living things. That's important that you note how spores are spread. They're spread through the air, in the water, and by living things. They will germinate upon finding a favorable substrate and produce a new fungus colony in a very short time. So there's two types of spore formation. There's asexual spores and there's sexual spores. So asexual spores, they basically multiply by mitotic cell division, or mitosis. And sexual spores are actual fusing of two parental nuclei and then, multiplying by meiosis or meiosis. So sexual reproduction actually increases the genetic variations among spores, so it gives a little bit more variety in the spore. So two types of asexual spore formation. The sporangiospores. These guys are formed by successive cleavages within a sac-like head called a sporangium. And then the conidiospores are free spores not enclosed by a sac. Sexual spore formation, basically it's the linking of genes from two parent fungi, creating offspring. So it's kind of easy to kind of explain that one. Lots of adaptations based on sexual spore formation, so they're probably going to have a better experience at survival. So, okay, so going here, protozoa. Name comes from the Greek first animals. Most are harmless, kind of hanging out in the water and the soil. A few species are pathogens and responsible for hundreds of millions of infections each year. So, protozoa form and function. Single cells containing all the major eukaryotic organelles except a chloroplast. I'm not going to get into the ectoplasm or the endoplasm. So, protozoa nutritional and habitat range. They are heterotrophic, require food in a complex organic form. Some absorb food directly through the cell membrane. The pathogenic species may live on fluids of their hosts, like the plasma or the digestive juices, or they have the ability to actively feed on tissues. The main limiting factor for protozoa and their survival is the availability of moisture. So lack of moisture means they aren't going to necessarily do too well. The predominant habitats are fresh and marine water, soil, plants, and animals. Some of the hardier species can actually survive in extreme temperatures and pH. So the life cycles of the protozoa, we have the trophozoite, which is the motile feeding stage, require ample food and moisture to stay active. And then there's also the cyst, which is more like the dormant and resting stage. So when the environment is unpleasant for the trophozoite, they will be in this cyst stage. This cyst is resistant to heat and drying and chemicals. The cyst can be dispersed by air currents, can be blown around to be spread, and the cyst is the important factor in the spread of disease when it comes to these protozoans. So you can see here, you don't have to really regurgitate this to me, but it just kind of is an illustration of the life cycle of the protozoa. So you have the trophozoite, there's lack of nutrients, it's dry, so it's going to form into a cyst. Okay, and then once there's moisture and nutrients, then basically the cell wall breaks open and the trophozoite is reactivated, and it can kind of go back and forth between these life cycles. Some protozoan groups exist only in the trophozoite phase, and many alternate between that cyst and the trophozoite. Trichomonas vaginalis, which is a common STD, does not form cysts. It must be transmitted by intimate contact. And Entamoeba histolytica and Giardia lamblia are actually able to form cysts and are readily transmitted in contaminated water and foods. When I worked in the hospital, I actually had a patient come in. They didn't know what was wrong with him, and I think he was having intestinal issues, and they sent a stool sample down, and I took a look at it, and I did find Giardia. He was a local person. So, it's not only a third world country problem. You certainly can get things like this around here. Protozoa reproduce by simple asexual mitotic cell division or fission. Sexual reproduction also occurs in most protozoa. So we have ciliates actually participate in conjugation, in which two cells fuse and exchange the micronuclei, and this results in a new and different genetic combination that can be advantageous in evolution. So here are some major pathogenic protozoans. I would kind of look over these. Some of them that I would be most concerned with are the ones that affect humans. So Entamoeba histolytica, I would be familiar with what that causes, the disease, amoebiasis, Giardia lamblia, that causes giardiasis, intestinal distress. Where does it come from? The animals, the water, and the food. Trichomonas vaginalis causes an STD. Trypanosoma brucei and Trypanosoma cruzi. These guys are going to be major problems if someone gets infected with these. And I'm going to move to the next one. Plasmodium vivax is malaria. I would be sure that you know that anything that starts with plasmodium is related to malaria. Toxoplasma gondii causes toxoplasmosis. Cryptosporidium causes cryptosporidiosis, and so on. So I would be familiar with the ones that cause human issues. So we're going to pause here and start up with part 3 in the next video.